Hi Phil and the rest of the board and everyone else. I'm Dr Peter Brandson. I'm the founder of Bank Reform Now. People can Google us if they want to find out what we do, but generally me and my fellow warrior colleagues, bank warrior colleagues, are trying to bring about reforms which bring about a more honest banking system. I've got three issues I want to talk about, and if we get through them smoothly, I promise not to come back for another round. That's a good incentive. First, a quick question. How many cases in the last 2 years have NAB senior executives reported to the police and ASIC where a staffer has behaved dishonestly and or broken the law in order to disadvantage a NAB client?
I'm not sure, but if you keep asking your questions, I'll see whether I can get an answer for you on that one.
Thanks for that, Phil. Next point. Given your 3 lines of risk defence, that is your risk teams embedded across the business, chief risk officers and your own internal audit function, let alone EY's CPS 220 risk review or external audit, catastrophically failed in preventing or detecting the massive internal fraud allegedly perpetrated by your former CEO's chief of staff, amounting to $26.7 million according to latest reports, how can NAB's shareholders have confidence that such an event cannot and will not occur again, given the fraud in this instance was only detected after a staff member came forward with concerns?
So the fraud in the office of the Chief Executive Officer was obviously something that was very concerning to the board and to the bank more generally, and that item itself, I think, is likely to be in the courts again in the near future. Subsequent to that, a thorough review of financial controls was undertaken with particular emphasis on the Office of the Chief Executive, but not limited to that. That identified that the controls in the Office of the CEO were not adequate, and they have been significantly uplifted. And I guess unusually, I'm in the unique position of being able to see firsthand how they actually operate now, having for 9 months, having sat in the Office of the CEO to ensure that those controls are acting the way I would expect them to as a board member. The more general issue about the internal control environment is something that we spoke about in our self-assessment document last year, where we identified that there were still other areas of our internal control environment that needed to be sharpened and improved. And work has been underway to look at controls generally across the company to bring them up to standard. So obviously, having come into these positions relatively recently, I can't give you 100% assurance that everything has been identified. What I can tell you is that the current leadership team are focused on ensuring that items that have occurred in the past cannot happen again through a material uplift in our control environment.
Well, that's the issue. I mean, we're hoping that the new team, particularly you and Ross, will bring about changes. There are a couple of other elements to that particular story, though. The bank, and specifically Andrew Thorburn, couldn't detect serious criminal misconduct under his own nose, just like they found it difficult to detect misconduct against clients perpetrated from deeper in the business, and sometimes many years ago. What's the story overall? Is it poor systems? Is it incompetence? Is it negligence? Or is it willful blindness in pursuit of profit? Because sometimes it seems that things get swept under the carpet in order to generate extra profits for the bank.
Yes, again, I'll go back to the self-assessment document where I would say that there were a number of causal factors that we found for some of the weaknesses in controls. Overt greed is not something that we observed as such, although some may still interpret it as that. What we did see was a rush to do things and finish the work before it was done properly, a lack of thoroughness and a lack of expertise applied in critical areas. So the focus that we've had as we've been reforming the organisation is to bring in a lot more depth of expertise, particularly those who have expertise in other markets, because we felt that the Australian market was perhaps too insular and not getting the benefit of experiences from offshore. So to that end, we've brought in people who have expertise in controls, expertise in financial crime is a good example, expertise in other areas of the organisation to ensure that we were lifting our standards to the best global standard not simply accepting what had been done before.
Okay, just the final issue. I'd just like to pay a bit of kudos to Phil, because 10 days ago he was good enough to meet with me and the Biritz family. Previous CEOs and boards from all the big banks, in fact, have not done the right thing regarding legacy cases such as theirs, but the environment has now changed. The old days are over. The standard delay, deny, deceive routine is no longer effective. We have well and truly reached the point where bankers just look foolish when they deny the bleeding obvious. Evidence, logic and facts trump deceptive bank lawyers with their form letters and flawed arguments. Phil, you've made many commitments, including to the House Economics Committee, regarding sorting out and remediating aggrieved clients promptly, but NAB unfortunately has been the slowest of all the banks. I think shareholders would like legacy cases sorted, because you're right, the longer they go on, the more it will cost to settle. It's time NAB reduced the risk faced by shareholders, get back to running an ethical business providing services that customers actually need and value. Please put me out of your misery. Can you commit to remediating the remaining legacy cases within 90 days?
I wish I could answer yes to that question. We have, over the course of the last year, and I'm sorry I've forgotten the exact numbers, but we have remediated a significant number, or made offers for remediation, a significant number of legacy cases. I have to say there are still some legacy cases where we do not agree with what is being argued, and therefore it's our duty to the shareholders to ensure that we only remediate where the underlying issues are actually satisfied. Well, I can't obviously get into any details, and the one thing I am aware of, because I have taken the time to meet with both customers and those acting on their behalf, is these are incredibly stressful stories, and ones that are quite confronting to deal with, and that's why we are dealing earnestly with as many as we can.
They're heartbreaking, and I appreciate your personal interest and involvement, and thank you for this great opportunity.
Thank you, Peter. I'm sorry, I just want to, before we go on to the next question, I just want to answer the first question, which is we haven't been in the practice of disclosing referrals to police. Indeed, I don't think the police would want us to do that. But where we do refer dishonesty offences, it is our policy to refer items to the law enforcement authorities. The one thing we do disclose are breaches of code of conduct where they are identified. And what we can say is in the last year, either from breaches of code of conduct or for other reasons, we had to take action around 1,278 people in the organisation. Some of those were relatively minor offences, such as failing to complete their mandatory training, others more serious. That resulted in 292 people leaving the National Australia Bank as a result of behavioural acts. 124 of those were dismissed, 168 resigned. That's broadly in line with the previous year, slightly up on dismissals, slightly down on resignations.
Any jailings for any misconduct?
I'm not aware of anyone being jailed for misconduct.
So the funny thing is that the person who ripped off the bank is looking at jail, and sometimes when the clients get ripped off, no one gets jailed. That's the dilemma. Thank you.
Thank you.